It takes nothing to have something. Because you wouldn't know what something was without nothing. You wouldn't know what the form is without the background space. All the sun and stars and the mountains and rivers and the good men and the bad men and the animals and the insect, the whole bit. All are contained in void.
And so we might say this is an experience of the void.
The eyes of humans are positioned in the front of our heads. We are creatures looking forward. An accident of evolution, perhaps, that gives us the disadvantage of a narrower field of view, but grants us a precise perception of depth. We desire things at far distances. We imagine how things could be different far away. We want to be somewhere else, and we want to be there now. And then we created a machine, and the machine solved this incredible puzzle. But the machine needed a path. The path needed a system, and the system needed a network, carving the land into a bloodstream of rubber and gasoline. Some spaces would thrive, while others, once remote, were brought to our fingertips. Some spaces became holding pens, and others became wastelands. But this is the story of what's left over, of the spaces that are made significant by their non-existence. Spaces whose sole purpose is to make others useful. The dead zones. The no man's land. The netherworld in plain view. A world that is everywhere and nowhere.
It's fun to have an adversary, and cars are kind of a great adversary.
Suburbia hadn't really kicked in yet. That was really post-World War II. And so while the car was becoming more prevalent, cities were still characterized by good infrastructure in public transportation. Of course, it becomes easier to realize, oh, well, let's give the street over to things on wheels.
Linking all the cities in the U.S. with a massive grid of high-speed infrastructure. That was totally car-centric, and basically that was the turning point, I think.
I'm always sort of fascinated by this, that Americans love to get in that car. It's my property and it's my movement. You're in the way of my car, you're in the way of my house, you're in the way of my commercial gain, my business. You know, how dare you?
Freeways just impose on a place. I mean, they're just physically massive and dark and uninviting.
These things are huge barriers. It's very hard. It's like having a river suddenly in the middle of your city, and very hard to cross.
Back when Eisenhower was doing, they just blasted right through neighborhoods and without any care, just like whatever. These people won't complain. Let's just go. Let's just tear these houses down. We'll build a freeway there and done.
All these things combine over time relatively quickly to create conditions which emphasize the private use of public space. That is a sort of a privatization of the space. It means that it's mostly going to be used by people who can afford cars, right, or who have somewhere to drive, and that's what we've devoted that space to. And that's most of our public space. It's most of the place where you can be, as in your body, out in the open, and you have a right to be there. And if you take that right of way and you calculate how much is devoted to a car, you realize that the little sliver that you as a human being are allowed to be on is quite small compared to the amount of space we devote to people in their cars.
So we end up with a lot of oddball dead space, not just under the freeway, which may be dead if you've got an elevated freeway, but all these kind of little oddball corners of lots that they're not really using.
And you get these little leftover bits and pieces from constructions of freeways and off-ramps and streets. You get medians.
You know, when you don't have to be efficient with space, you get scraps. These are spaces that you probably ignore, 99% of the time. And when you start to notice them, you start to notice these scraps, and mostly they're the scraps of land left over from a car-centered design.
And there's like 150-foot high ramps. Like, it's crazy. And they all just like sort of snake around in and out of each other. Like when you're on them, you're just like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. But then you forget that there's like all this whole other world below you. And what is that world?
And like, how long have kids been fucking like teenagers, like looking for some place to get drunk or some place to fuck? Like trying to find something alternative, something different, something that was just ours. And only ours for the sake of bothering to claim it. Nowadays, it's just some place to come and think. I like to sit and watch the trucks go by, trains go by. There's a really beautiful cacophony of sound. It's like an orchestra. You have the pattern of the cars going, the trucks, the trains, street traffic, people yelling, dogs barking. It's an odd symphony, and I find it actually personally very calming. It's not like walking on the street where everything is locked in by a block and there's a concrete and there's the facade of someone's house and a gate, and it's all very rigid. You got the street or a building. Out here you've got kind of more wilderness. I think this is the best blank palette ever. Back in the 80s, I used to do like my tags and these like the big bubble letters, like classic 80s, like that was the kind of shit we were throwing up. I always find places like this. Like, our thing wasn't so much to put it someplace where everybody can see it. Our place was to put it in the oddest places that only the right people would see it. You know? It's kind of a claim to fame to find a spot that no one's hit yet. Put your piece there, because someone else comes, they know you've already been there, you know? Yeah. I don't do graffiti anymore, I was saying back in the day, but I have a healthy respect for it. Sticking up. All kinds of native grasses. eco preserve. It's really cool. I just like it down here, man. This is like a huge vein, an artery right here. I mean, if San Francisco is the heart of the Bay Area, this is definitely the arteries coming out of it. All these passes and freeway overpasses. This is, I believe, the 580. I believe that's the 880. And the 80 is right back there. And they all kind of come to this nexus right here where we're standing. So this catwalk runs the length of the highway. It probably runs about a good quarter mile, half a mile this way, and about a quarter mile, half mile this way. It's really fun to explore. There's three different catwalks. There's 3 different tubes, so to speak, that run the length of the thing. And again, we would take our ropes and hang them off these cross beams here and there, and then you tie yourself in, climbing harness, and just do a free rappel down. Just for the bug of it, it's just fun. Right here you can see the lights of the city, and the sewage treatment plant too, but it's a really nice view out here. And actually, we're here having a really good time. Come on, that's Fetty. I had a group back in the day called Urban Research League, or the URL. I started with my friend. We have business cards printed up, and so we started designing kind of self-guided tours where we could just post an address or an intersection, for example, and someone could go to that intersection. And if they had the business card, again, they're just hobo symbols, but they had the business card, they could just start walking around. They would see, go this way. So they go that way, and after a while they'll see, enter here, and they could enter here, or maybe enter here and beware of the guard shack, or a few feet up the way, beware of the guard shack, whatever the case may be. But again, to create self-guided tours, so you wouldn't have to actually show anybody anything, but if they were in the know, if they understood the language of it, so to speak, then they could guide themselves and go explore these spaces for themselves. And that was our goal.
Pretty much, every place somebody's been there. There's a footprint there. So the new places to explore are the places that have been left, that have been abandoned, that are unknown and unwanted. I find that idea really appealing. You could be in the middle of 6 million people, and you can be completely alone anytime you want if you pay attention to your environment. And you can be by yourself to think, to turn off your stupid phone and turn off the noise. And that's a big part of it, I think. I came into it in the 70s when you had this giant abandoned infrastructure all around, and they'd find stuff in these abandoned spaces, completely using the rotting detritus of the closing of that industrial empire, that industrial age. I joined the San Francisco Suicide Club when I was 18, and I was a juvenile delinquent, ran away from home, came to California, and I had one friend out here, Ron Unger, who was a couple years older, and he was a freshman at UC, and he was involved in all kinds of interesting shit. He kept telling me about this group called Communiversity. It was some weird free school, and I thought it was some goofy cult or something, but it sounded like they did these classes and did a lot of study groups and this sort of thing. It sounded cool, but it wasn't anything I was really interested in. And then one time, they were doing a class called the Suicide Club. And I've never in my entire life had any one small piece of writing affect me so completely. Everything they wrote was exactly what I wanted to do. It was like, we're going to explore abandoned buildings, we're going to climb, urban structures, we're going to infiltrate weird cults, we're going to do street theater, and it's all this crazy shit. And we would just search the urban environment for what I called, negative spaces. You look for places that are not being used. And even in the most densely populated, completely used inner city area, you will find places that people walk right by and don't notice that are not in current use or used intermittently or not in use at all. The primary thought behind the Suicide Club came from Gary Warren, and he was inspired by a lot of things. He was inspired by the Dadaists and the Surrealists. He was inspired by American pulp fiction. We were creating events and adventures based on things that we were afraid of or didn't think we would be able to do. And it's funny because Gary's idea, one of his many ideas, was that fear is something, if you fear something so often, your fear of it is unfounded because you've never done it, so you don't really know what there is to be afraid of until you've actually gone through the motions. And so we would do things like, for me, climbing stuff I wasn't afraid of climbing stuff, but many people in the group would be a huge challenge for them to climb stuff. And we brought people who were not climbers to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, the Bay Bridge, into sewer tunnels, all over the place. And I guarantee that people, even if they only climbed the Golden Gate Bridge once 35 years ago, every time they drive across that bridge, they look at it differently. They don't just see it as a road, right? Because you can't. You see what it really is. It's a jungle gym. It's not just a road, it's a fucking jungle gym. And people learn that. For me, my fears, because I was raised middle class, and I was afraid of being embarrassed in public, big fear of mine. So the event that scared the crap out of me, the first one that I did that was really frightening, and probably the most frightening, actually the most frightening, was getting naked on cable cars in Chinatown with 30 other people. And there were other people in the group who were like, yeah, whatever, getting naked, we do that, they could care less, right? It didn't scare them at all, it was fun. And then we did it, there's 30 of us on the cable car, it's like 7 in the morning in Chinatown, and these little Chinese ladies are walking by with their bags going to their shop in the morning. They didn't even fucking look at us, what are these stupid honkies doing, whatever, And they just, about 86, a bunch of the people who'd been in the Suicide Club were bored. And they're like, let's start another group. What do we call it? I don't know. They came up with a bunch of stupid names and finally settled on Cacophony Society. And we were going to do a newsletter like we had in the Suicide Club, and nobody could come up with a name for it. So it was the Rough Draft. So the newsletter ended up being Rough Draft. And so we printed up our monthly newsletter. We started doing events. And by 1990, it was cooking. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of people involved. And that's when we conjoined with Burning Man and went to the desert. It was Cacophony Society Zone Trip number 4. I mean, that was what the event was. I had been in the desert in the mid '80s with friends from work, and Kevin Evans. He had been out there the year before with a small group for an art event that a local group had put on. And when the two of us realized that we'd both been in the desert, we were both so tripped out by the space. We're like, wow, this space is astonishing. It's an amazing place. And we're like, let's do an event. We have to do an event there. So we immediately started planning a Cacophony event. And Kevin had the idea, he said, well, why don't we, because we're going out to the desert on Labor Day, why don't we invite Jerry and Larry and 2 or 3 of the builders to come out and bring the Burning Man. And when Cacophony conjoined with the Burning Man crew, which was a very small crew at the time, that's when the idea of doing this intentional community in a desert came about. The big transition from being basically an overblown, like a beach party to being an event.
There are 1,000 stories that never happened here. It is a place marked by evidence of organizations no one's ever heard of. People that no one ever sees, and languages that no one understands. A place you see every day and know nothing about. It contains portals to the great engines of our civilization. Power, water, sewage, and television. But it appears to have a profound uselessness. It survives as a forgotten memory. It is here we find a land caught between what it never was and what someday it could be.
This is the bottom of the barrel. Correction. This is under the bottom of the barrel, as far as I'm concerned. I live there, that'll be my home. But being that I don't live there, I'm right here, this is my home.
Anywhere to be home, you know? Wherever you set up camp can be home.
I prefer overpasses, bridges, freeway overpasses, any kind of bridge that has a space underneath it.
But I have absolutely no problem about when they say leave. Okay, I let them see it. I'm not too enthused about this $30 billion apartment, no way.
Yeah, the islands, the medians, off-ramps with a stop light as opposed to a stop sign.
They'll stop for maybe 5 seconds, but 5 seconds really is not enough time for them to read your sign, decide whether or not they want to give you anything, and then actually look and find it and get it, and then give it to you.
You're at a point where you just don't really, you feel like you have no type of privacy, you know, and it's like going to the bathroom and just eating, sleeping, drinking, like whatever, you know, there's somebody that could be watching you.
You know, if I had to be invisible for a certain period of time, I was willing to do that. I was willing to sacrifice, you know, whatever dignity I could get in order to have just those few hours to sleep. Every time when I see somebody panhandling, or even when I was asking money, I noticed a lot of times they wouldn't make eye contact with me. You know, they just kind of look away like I wasn't even there. And it was kind of like that same feeling. It's just like, oh, okay, you just want to give me the money so this problem will go away now. Maybe I'll just, you know, vanish into the ether. But it's not going to happen, you know. I'm a real person. I'm here, you know. I mean, why don't you acknowledge me? Why don't you see me? But they didn't. And so over time, I was like saying, well, you know, I guess, you know, I'm not really here.
The planning department's own motto has to do with providing a better place for people. But somehow that framework doesn't include the homeless. And yet they're using land. I mean, they're in space. They're physically on a sidewalk. They don't have land. And so, I would think the planners would want to have in their scope of things, you know, thinking about those people who don't have access to land.
That's just my dad and my baby daddy. And this is everyday life for us. We're right here on the corner, stuck.
And this is some of my work where we try to build and make bicycles, because some people can't afford to pay for a bicycle, so I put them together and make them and try to make them nice and comfortable for some people. Well, I got some, yesterday I got some boxes, and I start boxing things up because, you know, we never know at any time we may have to pick up and leave. I respect that. So I try to do things that the family can do and kind of keep our mind off really being out here, being homeless and being outside.
Have a cigarette?
Try to have as much fun as possible together. Like I say, this is not gonna last. It's not gonna last forever. You know, that's what keeps us going.
I live in the tents here with me, my dad, sometimes one of his girlfriends, and my uncle stay over there, him and his girlfriend. I think we were trying to run up this hill, and I didn't have enough breath, so I went in there to check my breathing, and they told me I was 17 weeks pregnant. So I felt that I was pregnant here. Caltrans took everything I owned last week, so I don't have anything but the clothes on my back and one pair of shoes. They give you an eviction notice, and if you're not there within that time, they take your stuff. They took everything I own. I have brand new everything for my other kids, for this baby. Everything was taken, so I have nothing.
This is where I lay my head at, you know. I was in an abusive relationship. I was married, and my ex-husband cheated on me, and he stabbed me in the throat. So now I have to wear a trach, but it's not permanent. It's bad, you know. I'm breathing in this stuff, and the only way I breathe is through my neck. I don't breathe through my nose, my mouth, and it rains, the mold and the piss and the urine, and it's just crazy. I can't take that because it's like a liability to my health.
As you can see, this area is subject to a lot of construction debris, illegal dumping, as we see here. The homeless love it because this debris serves as their building materials. So they actually use this to build their homes with. The steel bridge, all that green that you see there, all that's lead-based paint. And then all this soil here has to be tested for ADL, early deposit lead. There's an individual up there who's basically living in ADL impacted soil. So there are heavy metals, there's lead, there's chromium, any kind of petroleum-based product is going to end up here, as well as dog and human waste. Fecal coliform is very prevalent in this area. When you walk down here, you actually have to wear special boots so that you don't get that bacteria on you. In some instances, I have seen individuals wash their clothes, and on extreme cases, they probably will even bathe in it on a limited basis. This is an example of a rejuvenated right-of-way. We had the Olympics here in '84. This is an example of a positive thing for that. There's no way to get in here, you know.
There's no legal way to get in.
You're off the freeway, you got the railroad track, you got Alameda Street, but you can't stop. Well, the mall's over there. I guess you could walk if you really wanted to do that.
But you're not really supposed to walk on it.
Yeah, you can't.
So it's a park that you can't.
Right.
Why is it so strange, this place? A place as common as it is unnoticed. A place as pervasive as it is hidden. Trafficking in an unrecorded series of temporary, forgotten interactions. It is as unsettling as it is mundane. Weird, perhaps, because it reminds us that even the places we call home, the places we thrive, are themselves only somewhat less temporary, and are full of interactions that in the scheme of things are only somewhat less forgotten. A place we stop briefly and move on.
Like if you think about it as a dead space or a median or a place that's, you know, funked out, right? On some level, an urban planner would see it as a blight, where, you know, the difference between how an artist might look at that might say, oh, blank canvas, right? And you think about, as an artist, you think about what you could do with that space, or you find something really interesting you want to talk about, and then you find the space that works.
Doing projects in medians and in liminal zones and voids is great because it allows you to basically, it's not so much that they're temporary, it's that they're iterative, that you can try something, see what works, use what worked and keep it going, scrap what didn't work. These are invisible places with invisible stories that people can turn into something kind of amazing, and that's fantastic.
Hundreds of people wandered up and down the grassy medium strip on Monument Avenue, looking at art and discussing the controversy that had brought them together on a Tuesday evening.
So here we are, the international teams are starting to warm up here. The first ever Melbourne International Median Strip Table Tennis Championship.
Welcome to Kampala's traffic culture. You've got people who live in these traffic spots. Hallelujah! It is the way.
It is the way.
Truth and life.
Non-celebrity traffic island.
Hi, welcome to Non-Celebrity Traffic Island. This is the show where people who aren't quite celebrities, who have very little chance of ever being a celebrity, get a chance to be marooned on a traffic island.
The red and blue teams are both tired and hungry, but then Graham finds a clue.
When you come across Route 40, these roads, these businesses, this medium strip is the first thing people see about our town. We need that look to be top-notch.
A disturbing discovery is made along Route 50 in Prince George's County. An unidentified body was found in the median of the busy road. And now police are trying to figure out how it got there.
He has his turn signal on to go into oncoming traffic on 81. Oh my God, he got airborne.
His bumper.
He lost his bumper. Wow. This is great. I really don't know what she's doing. I lost her. Oh, dude. She hit another. Oh my God, that was huge. Shit.
Oh, and guerrilla gardening is really not about beautification, but I like that it ends up, improving the way things look, but it's not its primary function.
What is it?
It's about teaching stewardship of ecosystems by example, teaching alternative. So here we are at my newest installation. This was a lot of fun. Humans are sight-driven land animals. We're delicate genetically. A small microorganism, 40 generations is about how long it takes for a strain of DNA to adapt to a new toxic chemical, for example, 40 generations. 40 generations for a bacterium could be 2 weeks. For a human, it's thousands of years. So we're extremely delicate. We're gonna be destroyed unless we learn now. So cities are the best place to begin, and the most public space in a city is in the middle of the street where people are driving. When people drive by, they can see changes. And even if they don't pay attention to plants, people will notice changes at a subconscious level. Part of my strategy as far as what's the most important purpose is to get people aware of things other than humans. That's really, really critical. And it sounds very simple and very obvious, but make no mistake that it's a radical, aggressive act. I've never asked permission to do anything at all, and I won't. Either they'll round up something that I've planted, or they'll just hack it to the ground. Like, they don't really like apunchas, but I'm gonna use apunchas anyways. Oh, I better put on my hat, sorry. These cameras are so good you'll be able to watch my skin cancer growing. I've got lemons in here, I've got pomegranate, I have prickly pear in here. This prickly pear that I planted is really cool because it looks felty. You never want to touch an apuncha unless you know what you're doing. I didn't even think about this space, for the first 4 years that I was here, 4 or 5 years, I didn't even realize it was here. So there were these shrubs that were just like dead things and these trees, and that was it. And it was quite a bit simpler than this, but it served very little ecological function. They're neglected spaces, so for me, it's a space where I have a little bit of creative latitude, so a little bit of creative license. That's part of the thing with guerrilla gardening, you just fucking do it. What I'm doing by creating a guerrilla garden is I'm trying not to create like a median strip at a mall. I'm trying to create surprises. Okay, if you're in like a Target parking lot median, it's a monoculture. Even if there's multiple species in it, even if they're they're trying to create a unified look. That's a human concept. That's not nature. Nature is not a park strip. It's not a median strip. It's not pleasing to the fucking human eye. It is something else. Plants are the bottom line. We have no air, no water, no food
my favorite movie is Jaws, and there's this moment where Hooper says to Chief Brody, "Oh, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a guy who hates the water to live on an island." And Brody says, "Well, it's only an island if you look at it from the water." He's like, inside of it, you just notice it as a piece of land. It's like having potential to be in your home. And I kind of like that. And the Hooper, of course, says, "Well, that makes a lot of sense," kind of sarcastically. But it actually does make a lot of sense to me. Like, you can do something with this space, and it doesn't have to be this island. It can just be a space that actually has value.
You never find a space that isn't, that is truly empty. So a median is not an empty or neutral thing at all. From both perspectives, it's not empty literally, it's also not an empty thing ideologically.
Is it productive? Can it be something else other than just a green space? Can it be like a productive green space, which is what I think should be happening. We should be making all of these places productive places.
There's an impetus to use every square inch of space for something. That's part of the focus of struggle, right? Because you can use something to make a profit from it, build a building, build housing, or you can use something that has a wider benefit and doesn't necessarily associate it with exchanging it for something else like money.
So you've got these medians, they're doing their job. All they're to do is separate two lanes of fast-moving traffic. So now people think, well, ultimately, nothing's going on between these two. They're doing their job. Could we use it for anything else? The practicalities of getting and using a median are defined by the environment in which they're in. So a lot of people kind of have idealistic things that they want to do to a median, but you've got to remember also access.
They have such great potential. They have really good light exposure, and they could be used for growing a lot of really good food. What I do, I call it foodscaping, because it's not just landscaping, but it's actually designing with food productive plants. So it's foodscaping.
Well, go to the median and stand there for a day, right? Stand there for a day, go home and cough into a white handkerchief. It will just be black and scummy. It's like being on the London Underground for a day. It's not nice, and I wouldn't want food grown there. It's the lovely thing about nature in California, you know. So I'm not saying that there isn't land use issues we could use there. What about things that don't require tons of access but are required everywhere, like electrical substations, Google server farms? There we go. Yeah, I'd be quite happy with that. Yeah, let some little Googler run across the freeway every time he needs to change a server, run back again. Yeah, got another one. That would be good.
You know, I'm trying to think of, like, if everything was developed, I mean, I don't think there's a real danger of 100% development, but if everything was developed and there were no zones for people to go to that weren't already sort of thought of as something else, or have some kind of pop-up cupcake shop or something inside of it, you know, what would that be like? That could be its own sort of dystopia. So you, again, it's all about making an ecosystem where you have zones that are being used really well, zones being used for permanent things, zones being used for temporary things, and zones that do have potential for people to imagine and grow and turn stuff into, and zones for people to escape to that no one has considered.
It's 5 somewhere in the world. This is the foundation, the beginning of the foundation right here. But it still takes more work. Well, why I come down here, why I came down here is because it's interesting, when they built the MacArthur Freeway, there used to be homes here. So like this was like a hill that went to the other side, and they actually dug the freeway down. And when they planted this vegetation in the, 60s, I'd say early 60s, they just sort of let it go. So no one ever comes here, no one ever landscapes, no one ever looks after, or comes in or does any work. So I thought that this place would be the easiest to like conceal a little spot, like make a little hiding spot down here. And then I can come down here and, plan things and evil plans. Working at this adobe clay to build the foundation. This could be a long project. I've always been kind of interested in these like marginal spaces and abandoned spaces. And whereas this is like just a total jungle. Thousands of people are passing by every minute and they don't even know you're here. The way these interstates have changed our cities and changed our lives is profound. So the road becomes this like monster that we live around and don't really think about, what it did, what used to be here. There used to be a town here where we're sitting. Because of eminent domain, they tore down the houses. They carved this giant ditch. These are the sides of the giant ditch, and there's the freeway right down there. And, destroyed some lives, probably. But then you're left with these, strips of just forgotten, what are we going to do with that? Let's just plant a bunch of plants and see what happens. And for a while, I bet they looked after it, but that was, 40-something years ago. And now it's just total anarchy. Every plant's trying to get sunshine. Every plant's fighting for itself. And I'm down here hiding it in brush, trying to make a little patch for myself. And it's just forgotten, so I claim it as my own. It's mine now. I'm the emperor of this forest, and I'm only allowed you in here by special permission. Every year, more people go to Mount Everest than come here. Every year, there's more people visit the South Pole than come into this stretch of woods. And these people go looking for adventure in the wildest places, like the top of Everest. But I can come here. It's right by my house. It doesn't cost anything. And I'm the only visitor. So they've created these forests, these forgotten forests, and there's no plan for it. There's no, is it nature? I guess so. It's fucking plants everywhere and stuff. But we're in the middle of a city, and it's, I imagine some guy will come through from Caltrans maybe and hack away at some brush at some point in the future, but right now it's purely left to itself. People talk about invasive species and things, or that's non-native, that's invasive. Nature doesn't give a shit. Nature doesn't care what's native or what's non-native. It's just total chaos back here. Some of these were landscaping plants that have gone totally wild, like this ivy. It doesn't care about people at all. Our presence is not required here. We're not needed. This is just the anarchy of nature. What we decide is nature and what nature decides is nature are two different things. And this is what nature decides it is, just like a battle for sunlight and for water and for soil and rodents and insects and things like that. But look, nobody knows we're here. Nobody, right? All those people, nobody knows we're here. And they wouldn't care anyway. And after we die, after all the humans are gone, the brush will just take over. It'll take over the freeway, the interstates. The brush will just consume it all. All these trees will fight up through the cracks in the concrete. And so this is a snapshot of what it's going to be like when we're all gone. This just total, all these introduced plants, they won't care. They don't care they're introduced or that they're non-native. They'll just, take over. It's like a vision into the future if you come into these spots. This is what we have to look forward to.
How do we form a conclusion about this scattered, forgotten world? One whose sense of possibility is carved out by the very infrastructure of its restraint, whose anarchy of nature emerges from great feats of human engineering, whose sense of value is derived from its worthlessness, and in whose desolation we find freedom. We are left with a world that remains unsure whether it is a vision into our future or a relic of our extinction. Unsure whether it is a world without us. Or a world within us.